Director of Inclusive Learning and Creative Impact, which is really the Director of Education, but part of my scope of work is to give tours to different school groups such as yourself. You guys are working on a client connected project, right, for Uncover KC. So one of the things that we feel is important, I've not been able to have it happen yet, but eventually we would like to have a youth advisory board comprised primarily of high school students to really help us figure out ways to engage high school students better. Like sometimes the things that grown-ups and adults think are cool, people your age don't think are necessarily all that cool. And so we want to be able to pick your brains, as it were, to figure out ways that we can better engage your age group. But really quickly, what I'll do is give you some background on the mansion, because it's important that you understand that context, and then we'll talk about the history of Kansas City. So this mansion was built by a guy named Robert A. Long. He was a lumber baron, and mansion was built in 1910. It was the first $1 million mansion in Kansas City. It was the first mansion to have an elevator. Robert Long was married to Ella Long, and they had two daughters, Sally and Lula. So Lula, the youngest daughter, lived here with Robert A. Long, and Sally and her family would come to visit and stay here from time to time. Lula Long was an equestrian. She loved horses, and so right across the way there you'll see a carriage house, and that's where the horses and the carriages were kept. So anyway, the family lived here roughly till about 1938, and then Lula had acquired so many horses that it was necessary for them to build a farm. So Robert A. Long built Longview Farm, which is in Lee Summit, and Lula and her family moved there in 1938. Robert Long had passed away in 1934 while Longview Farm was being built. But if you're familiar with like Longview Community College, Longview Lake, all of those places are named after Robert A. Long. He was a prominent citizen. He was philanthropic. He really helped the economic growth of Kansas City, and he was very instrumental in building the Liberty Memorial, which is now where the World War I Museum is. So when the family lived here, they had 8 servants that lived in the mansion with them, and 16 that came to help maintain the property during the course of the week. So this was the kitchen, but we're converting it into Cafe 3218. So hopefully by the end of the year, this will be a functioning cafeteria where you can come, grab a sandwich, grab a burger, and hang out if you chose to. So we're gonna walk around because I wanna show you the mansion. So let me say this really quickly. So the family lived here until about 1938, then they moved to Longview Farm. Robert A. Long had passed away. The mansion was just sitting here. At that time, there were a group of women who felt that Kansas City should have a museum, a natural history museum. So they negotiated with the family in the city of Kansas City to buy this property, and they established the first iteration of the Kansas City Museum, which is really more of a natural history museum, a lot of stuffed polar bear and buffalo and things like that. And that the museum was popular in the city up until around the late 90s, early 2000s, and I don't exactly know why there was a decline in the popularity of visitorship, but the mansion was kind of starting to fall into disrepair, and the conversation was that the museum was going to relocate into Union Station. So here in Kansas City, at that time, there was a lot of discussion around renovating Union Station as well. So the museum staff, while they were there, came up with the idea for Science City. Have you guys ever been to Science City? Okay. So the Kansas City museum staff is the one who came up with that concept. There had been a planetarium on the property, so they built a planetarium in Union Station. So the mansion was just sitting here, and the city was like, so what are we gonna do with it? And so they eventually decided that 2 things would happen. They would renovate the mansion because this is an important property and a historic landmark in Kansas City, but that we would also attempt to tell the story of the history of Kansas City from roughly 1680 to the present. So I wanted to give you all that background information. So what we'll do is make a quick circuit through this first floor so you can